Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 46. You mess with the spider, you get the web. The net. Nailed it. Great title. When the school year started up, Izuku found himself in the delightful predicament of having too much food. He was getting breakfast from Shinso-san 3 days a week, lunch from school 5 days a week, and dinner and a nutrient packet from Eraser 6 days a week. The days that Eraser didn't have dinner for him, he usually spent over at the Shinso's, and Shinso-san would make him dinner instead. He was guaranteed at least dinner every single day. He was going to need to see if he could find a mini fridge to fix up at Dagobah, because right now he had to force himself not to leave leftovers because they wouldn't last long enough for him to save for weekend lunches. Things were going too well for him. He had food, and Kachan had been physically leaving him alone ever since the soccer incident, and everyone else was too easy to outrun now that he had experience running from actual criminals and not moronic middle schoolers. He had friends. Was Eraser his friend? A work friend? And DJ finally gave up her tough guy act and conceded to his love. She would wake up when he got back from school and putter around with him until it got dark enough for her to sneak attack the rats in the alley. And then, when Izuku got back from patrol, she would call it for the night and snuggle up to him. He hung out at Shinso's house 1 day each week and taught Shinso how to fight. Izuku had written out all the drills he used to do on his own when he was learning, and Shinso had been running through those on his own time, and he was getting better every day. Izuku still kicked his butt 10 times out of 10, but he was getting better. Yeah, things were going too well for him. It made him uncomfortable, like the calm before the storm. Were they still surprised when someone shot a net gun at them, though? Yes. Yes, they were. Where the hell did they get a net gun? How the hell were they supposed to combat a net gun? They had so many knives, but they couldn't even move enough to get one out. This sucked, and Eraser was laughing at them. The man hardly ever laughed, but when he did, it was always at their expense. Eraser, quit laughing and get me out of this, they whined. He took his phone out and snapped a picture of them so quickly that they almost didn't have enough time to stick their finger up at him. They were keeping calm for now, but they really didn't like being restrained or cornered or confined in any way. They were constantly keeping watch for ways to get out of a situation. They had been since they were 4 years old. So not having at least one clear avenue of escape sent them into fight or flight quicker than anything, and this was pushing it. Eraser had already restrained the perp. No one was getting hurt. No one was going to hurt them, but this was really pushing it. They shot him a look, and he seemed to get the memo because he stopped laughing long enough to pull out his own knife, and they knew he was going to cut the net. They knew that. They just had to stay still, and then they would be fine. But their stupid monkey brain was slamming the panic button because they couldn't move, and someone was walking toward them with a knife. It must have shown on their face because Eraser's grin disappeared entirely, and he started telegraphing each step. I'm going to cut your right arm free so you can cut yourself out, all right? He explained before getting too close. They nodded, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. The serrated edge of their own knife cut through the rest of the net like butter, and they sat for a moment to catch their breath. When they collected themselves, they looked back up at Racer. He was watching them closely. Apparently, he determined that they were going to be fine, because a grin crept back over his expression, and he snorted at them. Don't frickin' laugh at me. What the hell am I supposed to do against a net gun? They demanded. Dodge better. he stated after theatrically rubbing his scruff for a moment, like it was some sort of sage advice that required deep thought to come up with. Oh, piss off. I'd like to see you dodge a net gun. The spread on that thing was massive. Ivy shot back. Eraserhead just rolled his eyes at them, but they got their wish less than a week later. They dropped down on some guys that Ivy recognized from the gang when they were trying to mug some poor schmuck. The two of them touched down on either side of the altercation, thus sealing off all exits, when one of them pulled out a gun and fired it at Eraser. They freaked out for a split second before they saw the net, but once they did, they were almost laughing too hard to take down the perps. Almost. They were still a dang professional. Kinda. The two guys were cursing up a storm tied to both each other and a fire escape as Ivy walked over to where Eraserhead was lying on the ground, looking like he was about to take a nap, despite being tangled up in a net in a dirty alleyway at 2 a.m. Of course, the mother trucker had to be so unbothered. Ivy walked over calmly and knelt down by his head. Hey, Eraser. He drew out the last syllable to be extra annoying. Looks like you're in a bit of a pickle there, they taunted. Ivy, I'm going to kick your butt, he said as he glared at them through his perpetually half-lidded bored expression. Oh my, I'm quaking in my boots. Just one quick question before you do that, if you don't mind. They paused as if waiting for a response, but really it was just to push his buttons even more. How? How you gonna do that? You seem a bit, well, tied up at the moment, they droned on. You know, I was in a predicament not too dissimilar from your own a while back, and I got some great advice from a very wise man. Maybe it could help you out. Oh, let's keep things exciting. I'll give it to you in the form of a question. How about that? Have you, so sorry if this sounds patronizing, but have you considered perhaps dodging better? They asked with a shit-eating grin. Eraserhead's expression did not change from the bored and vaguely dissatisfied glare since they walked over, but Ivy couldn't help but cackle at him now. They snapped a picture of him as revenge before they cut him free. However, the smile fell from their face when the thought occurred to them that they were two net gun wielders away from ending up in the obituaries. Sure, it was funny, but it wouldn't be funny if they were both caught. No, that would be a death sentence. The previous guy also had ties to the gang. Loose ties, but ties nonetheless. He looked over to Eraser, who seemed to have come to the same conclusion if they were reading the minute change in his expression correctly. His eyebrows were 1 to 2 millimeters lower than their resting position, so he was either mildly troubled or pissed. It was difficult to tell between those two. They were leaning towards pissed if the way he was stalking over to the two guys they tied up was any indication. Where'd you get that gun? He demanded. The hell I'd tell you for, the chattier one barked back. He let them stew under his glare for a moment before responding. Possession of illegal support gear items is a serious charge. We've already got you for assault with a deadly weapon and attempted theft, but I'd imagine your sentence would be a good number of years harsher with all 3 crimes on your record. Tell me where you got it, and maybe we could just forget about this whole mess. You'd get a few years for the other 2 charges, but you'll be back on the streets soon enough. The 2 meatheads looked at each other for a moment, but the quiet one seemed to be the smarter of the 2, because he was the one that piped up. Piss off, jerk. How eloquent. Ivy dragged Eraser far enough out of earshot that they could murmur without the men overhearing them. Just call Suka. The fact they didn't immediately take the deal means that whoever they're ratting out is more of a threat to them than an extra 5 years in prison, which practically confirms that it's the gang. If it's somewhere else, Suka can at least get that info out of them. Eraser eyed them suspiciously. What do you mean he can get that info out of them? Well, if they lie, he'll know, they responded, looking at Eraser like he was an idiot. He raised an eyebrow at them for that. How exactly do you know that, Ivy? Do you know how many times I've seen the man cringe as he drags away people, shouting about how I didn't do nothing, that little jerk just jumped me? He couldn't be more obvious if he tried, they explained. Eraser just looked at them with a blank expression. I also pickpocketed his wallet and checked his ID, so that helped too, but that was just to confirm the theory. He didn't even notice. I put it back and everything, they added after a moment of silence. At that, Eraser let out a long-suffering sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose between his forefinger and thumb. I've also stolen your pen at least 6 times. I've been waiting for you to notice. It's getting boring. I've got so many pens now. I don't even write with pens. I prefer pencils. You know, those nice mechanical ones with the extendable erasers. You should start carrying those instead, 'cause I'm running low, they chirped with a smile. Without warning, he went to sweep out Ivy's feet just like they did to Shinso when they got bored and wanted to mess with him. They were wise to that trick, so they didn't fall for it, but they did fall for the capture scarf to the ankle. That thing was still so hard to dodge. What the hell, man? No infighting in front of the criminals, they cried out from the ground. Eraser didn't even look at them as he tapped at his phone screen and held it up to his ear before responding. Stop stealing my damn pens then, he mumbled before the call went through. Tsukashi, send someone to pick up 2 perps on the southeast corner of Block 28. I want you to interrogate them personally. I'll send you the details. He waited enough time for a confirmation, then hung up with no preamble. Meet me at the northeast corner of the next block over. They're on their way, he said as he continued to tap away at his phone, likely typing out a quick written report to send to the detective. The illegal support gear trade was no joke. Net guns were fairly harmless in the grand scheme of things, but the support gear industry has been booming for decades. The best scientists around the world have been working to replicate all kinds of quirks through machinery for generations. Eraserhead's quirk would be useless against them, and that's the only quirk they had between the two of them. They were well and truly powerless against this crap, and they had no idea what else could be in store for them. This was about to become a real issue, wasn't it? End of chapter.